I'd like to welcome everybody to today's In the Tent with NRM webinar. The In the Tent series is, of course, the webinar series that NRM Regions Australia runs to invite our partners and collaborators to share their work and opportunities with the regional natural resource management sector. My name's Rachel Clark and I'm a knowledge broker and communications lead with NRM Regions Australia. I'd like to start today's webinar with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land that I'm joining from today, which are the Darug and Gundagara people. I'm joining from the Blue Mountains, which is a real treat. And I'd like to thank them and all the traditional owners across the country for their careful stewardship of country for thousands of years. We're in the tent with Climateworks and some other contributors to the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue today. And we are recording this session so that those who weren't able to make it along are able to access it later. Just in terms of housekeeping, we will ask people just add questions to the chat as we go through, and we'll probably have a bit of a chance for a bit of additional Q&A at the end of the session. So the topic that we're looking at today with Climateworks is sort of looking at demonstrating and communicating the impact regional NRM organisations can have in their critical work in building and protecting national capital through using tools like the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue. There won't be anyone in the room today who hasn't wanted to have a different or more localised data or information available to them at some part in their work life to tell a more interesting or more complete or more compelling story about their work or their understanding or observations of changes to natural capital at different scales. The Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue is an open, scientifically rigorous resource for users to identify suitable metrics, methods and data sources for the measurement of natural capital assets, flows of services or benefits and organisational impact or dependencies on nature. And it has been designed to support a wide range of stakeholders who might use natural capital accounting or natural capital assessment to inform their business or organisational decision making, and includes landholders, government, NGOs, corporate sector, the financial sector, and of course, our audience of regional NRM organisations. So we have today to explain and to explore the power of the NCMC. We have Ethne Cahill, who's the project manager, project impact manager of natural capital with Climateworks. We have Francisco Asui, who's a professor of environmental accounting from the Federation University, Richard Archer, who's the Program Delivery Manager with the Federation University, and Chris Pitfield, who is the Nature Finance Lead at Corangamite Catchment Management Authority in Victoria. So I'd like to really thank our presenters for joining us today and also for hopefully developing a tool that might make it easier for us to measure and communicate our impact to and with diverse stakeholders. So I'd like to ask everybody, just before I hand over, to mute yourselves. Please indicate where you're from. So just, go to the dots on your screen to rename and tell us, who you are and what organisation you're coming from. And I'll ask each of the presenters to hand the baton to the next person to minimise the time lost over in transfer. So in so doing, I'm going to hand it over to Ethne to start us off. Thanks, Ethne.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Rachel and the NRM team, for the opportunity to join you today. I'd first like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians, past and present, of the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, from which lands I'm joining today. For those of you who may not be familiar with Climateworks Centre, we operate as an independent not-for-profit within Monash University. Established 15 years ago, Climateworks bridges the gap between research and climate action to accelerate emissions reduction across Australia, Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Protecting and restoring nature is critical to achieve net zero. As Rachel has mentioned, and natural capital is, I know, a topic of great interest to NRM members. You've got some great resources on your NRM Knowledge Hub and have had some eminent experts, I know, previously present in the tents. As background, Climateworks convened a Natural Capital Summit going back in 2019, which brought together stakeholders across farming, technology, conservation, natural resource management, finance, investment, policy and R&D. From this summit, we developed a natural capital roadmap to really identify the priorities to support acceleration, alignment, coordination, and implementation of organisations working on natural capital. So over the last 6 years, our team at Climateworks Centre has focused on embedding the concept of natural capital in decision-making, and specifically the measurement and valuation of environmental assets as an important enabler of increasing sustainable land use. So this work has been conducted through our Natural Capital Investment Initiative, and a key part of which has been the development of the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue, or the NCMC. The catalogue has been developed with philanthropic funding from the MacDoc Foundation since 2022, and the development has been guided by a technical reference panel of experts from research institutions across Australia and an advisory group comprising of more than 50 organisations, including industry representative bodies, including the National Farmers Federation, financial institutions, government, land managers, research and supply chain, measurement service providers and consultancies. So all with an interest and expertise in measuring and improving natural capital. The problem we faced when we started, and it's still challenging today, is that everyone has their own way of measuring nature, which means there's a lot of information being produced that isn't necessarily consistent or comparable, and therefore not very decision useful. So it's like we're all speaking different languages, and that's where the NCMC is a bit like a dictionary, helping everyone to start converging on more consistent and comparable nature measurement. It isn't another new framework or standard, rather it relates those key frameworks such as the UN System of Environmental Economic Accounting, or SEEA, to others like the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, or TNFD, to help people understand the relationship and translate between them. So it doesn't provide any new methods or data sources. Instead, it points to existing methods and public data sources, making it easier for all kinds of users to find the resources. It's scientifically rigorous, but not prescriptive. It's available online and free for anyone to access. So the catalogue is, to the best of our knowledge, a world first, providing this a unique entry point for land managers and organisations in Australia to understand and navigate their interactions with nature. So many local and international organisations have referenced the catalogue, and some examples are shown on the screen here. A recent independent assessment has found that the catalogue's scientific rigour is highly valued by stakeholders. We're currently at a critical juncture to determine the NCMC's future direction to ensure it's adaptable and fit for purpose to meet the growing and future needs and expectations of a range of users. So this includes consideration of whether it needs to evolve from a reference tool to a more dynamic, user-focused platform that supports integrated planning. Richard will share more about a prototype that we're working on. And throughout the development of the catalogue, Climateworks team has been very fortunate to work with Francisco and benefit from his extensive expertise in environmental accounting and finance. So I'll now hand you over to Francisco to do a walkthrough of the catalogue. Thank you.
Thanks, Sethna. Ginger's just going to bring up the Natural Capital Measurement website. So if you haven't visited the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue website before, you'll see this splash screen to begin with, and you'll need to tick the terms and conditions box to continue. There's a very nice introductory video which you can watch in your own time, but right now we're going to dive right in. The main content of the catalogue is arranged in the two tabs on the left, Natural Capital Accounting and Natural Capital Assessment. And there's an overview of what those components of the catalogue are on that front page down there. We'll come back to that in a minute. If you're new, you might want to have a look at the user guide, which is accessible either through the tab on the left or the link on the front page. There's a lot of useful information in the user guide, including FAQs and references. There's also a tab for a glossary, which contains definitions, most of the key terms used throughout. If you prefer working in Excel, there's a spreadsheet version that you can download from that tab there. And there are a couple of case studies, one of which is the case study with Corangamite CMA, which you'll hear more about shortly. And finally, we're always welcoming feedback. So if you notice any errors or broken links or have any suggestions for additions to the catalogue, you can provide feedback through a form that's accessible at the bottom of the page on the left. So coming back to the content of the catalogue, there are two main ways to find things. You can use the search and filter function if you really know what you're after. You could search for a term like water quality, and then you'd be able to see where to go to find things related to water quality. The other way is by navigating or browsing through the catalogue, and I'm going to take you through those steps. So let's say you were wanting to do a set of natural capital accounts for a given area of land, then you'd be in the natural capital accounting section. This is further subdivided into individual environmental assets like mineral assets or timber resources, which you can account for separately, and ecosystems where you can account for whole ecosystems. Generally, ecosystem accounting is what people are more interested in. It's kind of the frontier at the moment. Within the ecosystem assets, you can navigate to the type of asset that you want to account for. So let's say it was an area of native forest or woodland. You'd be able to find that category. And this would take you to a results page, which collates in one place key metrics that enable you to do natural capital accounting for that ecosystem asset. So if you're at all familiar with ecosystem accounting, you'll recognize the labels in the tabs. So you account for stocks of assets by measuring their extent and condition, and you can account for flows of benefits or ecosystem services in physical or monetary terms. I don't have much time in this quick overview, so I'll just give one example. If we go under condition, you'll see a variety of possible condition metrics that are applicable to this type of ecosystem. Now, it's not prescriptive. It doesn't mean that you have to measure all of these things, and it's not necessarily complete because there's infinitely many different ways of measuring things, particularly condition. But these are, if you like, the usual suspects that we've collated from a number of different sources. So, for example, if you were interested in canopy height as a measure of condition, you would click on that metric, and this would then show you a results page with some high-level information about the type of metric that it is. It would relate it to the SEA ecosystem condition class that it's in, and give typical metrics that it's measured in. Then the core content of it is about example methods and example data sources, which are arranged in these three tiers, these three columns. Tier one being things that you could feasibly go and measure in the field yourself. Tier two being essentially the easiest and most accessible and cheapest publicly available data source that you could go to get information. And tier three being for everything more advanced. So for example, if you had a relatively small area that you wanted to go and measure in the field, you could follow any of these links, which in this case are to publicly available accounting for nature methods that talk about how to measure tree canopy height and related canopy height things in the field. If, on the other hand, you're an advanced user with GIS skills, you might go straight to looking at the tier three data sources, and you might notice, that there's a link to a high resolution canopy height map. So if you click on that, it will take you to a record within the data sources tab of the catalogue, where we have collated some of the key metadata to enable you to make a quick decision about whether this is a useful data source for you or not. So for example, you might look at the location that you're interested in and check that the spatial coverage covers that location. Or you might be interested in a particular spatial resolution to match the scale of the area that you want to measure. Here, for example, you might see, oh, it's 1 by 1 meter spatial resolution. You might think that's very impressive. So you want to have a look at the data source. You click on the link that we provide to the actual data source. And this will take you to a website where you can actually download that data. Now, this is the sort of result that we would characterize as being useful for a more advanced tier 3 user. But the good news is that in this case, there's also a tier 2 interface, which is accessible either here or back in the catalog under tier 2, which provides a map interface. So coming back to the catalog, that was a quick overview of natural capital accounting. The other main way of thinking about measuring natural capital is more from an organisational perspective, where we're interested in an organisation's impacts and dependencies on nature. So if that was your perspective, then you would go to the natural capital assessment section. This is also further subdivided into impacts and dependencies, each of which is subdivided into categories based on the type of natural capital that is impacted or depended on. So if, for example, you're interested in the organization's impacts on water quality, you would go to the impact section under water and choose water quality. This would take you to a page with a number of different metrics expressing different ways that you could possibly think about measuring water quality. So for example, directly measuring the amount of pollutants discharged, or indirectly measuring something like sediment inflows into a waterway by looking at areas of erosion, or directly measuring changes in downstream water quality. If it was those changes in downstream water quality you're interested, you would select that. Again, you would see a similar results page with some information about the type of metric, typical units it's measured in. And we also provide cross-references to key sustainability frameworks like the TNFD in this case, and the actual metrics are listed in the notes. Then again, we have example methods and example data sources arranged into the 3 tiers. So if you were wanting to measure water quality in the field, there's a reference to a Queensland government manual for doing that. If you were an advanced user, you could click straight through and have a look at the BOMS water data online. Again, you could have a look at the metadata, and if you were interested in something like turbidity, you would see that it's listed in the description, and therefore you might want to have a look at that data source. So coming back to the home, that's my quick overview of the content of the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue. Before I pass on to my colleague Richard Archer, I'll just note that the catalogue contains links to more than 80 different publicly available data sources at the moment. We estimate that finding and identifying as useful and collecting the metadata for those 80 different public data sources would probably take one person about 3 months of time if they knew what they were doing. So there's a substantial public benefit in providing that. But we recognize that just pointing people towards data sources doesn't solve all of their data problems for them. There are still substantial challenges in interacting with each individual data source, realizing which part of it you need, extracting the data and transforming it into decision useful information. So I'll pass over now to Richard, who will talk about some new work that's underway to address those problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. So I'm Richard Archer. I'm the Program Delivery Manager at Centre for E-Research and Digital Innovation at Federation Uni. And today I'm going to speak a little about our practical experience utilising the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue. I just acknowledge the Wathaurong people, traditional owners of the land from which I'm presenting today. So the problem statement for our project is that land managers are facing increasing demands for robust evidence that they're managing their land sustainably. They face challenges with different reports required by state government, federal government, the EU, their supply chain, their bank, their investors, and many of their industry bodies have sustainability frameworks, and the metrics within those frameworks are tailored to each sector. So all this leads to diverse reporting requirements, but the underlying metrics are mostly derived from the same source data. So we've commissioned a 2-year project to help streamline sustainability reporting for land managers. This project's a collaboration between Federation University, the Food Agility CRC, Corangamite Catchment Management Authority, Precision Agriculture and Southern Farming Systems. So with our goal of reporting broadly against sustainability metrics, this is clearly going to be a very data-centric project. And while there's no shortage of environmental data, as Francisco mentioned, it's very time-consuming to evaluate the utility of each data set. So the fact that the NCMC links natural capital metrics to around 80 different public data sources, it was really helpful for us because it saved us time finding those data sources, and it allowed us to pinpoint data sets that related to specific metrics of interest. The data set shown in the screenshot, it maps the Australian ecosystem extents to IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, to their global ecological typology. And I'll be referring to that a bit. I'll be calling that the IUCN GET from here on. And we make use of that classification scheme. So our approach is when we start working with new data sets that will visualize that. So we've built a custom web portal and we've imported this IUCN GET data set into the portal. And that lets our researchers and technologists just start to explore the data and the structure of the data set and the qualities of the data. So here we have the Victorian ecological vegetation classes, the EVCs, I'm sure you're all familiar with, being rolled up and visualized across our project's area of interest. So both EVCs and IUCN GET, they allow the classification of an area into ecological types, so you can separate reporting on forests and wetlands and grasslands. And what we then do is we can run a fairly simple analysis of the data set, and we can determine the extent of each EVC within our project boundary. The pie chart there is each of the EVC categories, and we've got a table showing the relative areas of each EVC. And with that information, we can now drill down and report on each EVC independently. So we can report on the condition of forests, or we can report on the condition of wetlands. So now we've identified some candidate extents, we need to find some data describing the condition of the environment within that area. So we head back to the NCMC, and this is really helpful because we could easily identify a dozen different data sets that were worth exploring. And here we've identified the Habitat Condition Assessment System as a prime candidate. It's a CSIRO data set, so it has reputation and quality behind it. It's quite detailed spatial resolution at 90 metres, so theoretically you could get down to paddock scale over fairly large properties. It's a temporal data set, so we can explore changes in this landscape over the last 25 years. And again, what we do is to visualize the data set. We load that into our portal and we start exploring. the data set. Now, this HCAS data set represents the ability of each 90-metre square area to support the extant native species population from pre-colonialisation. So it's the nature, by definition, of this HCAS data set that it reports on a pristine condition for forest areas, and it reports a degraded condition for farmland and for urban areas. And that raises questions about how we might derive insights from this data set and whether it's appropriate to assess farmland against its ability to support native species when that's not its current use. And it probably is justified to assess forests against this model. But HCAS, it's a time series data set. So even if you can't draw a direct correlation between the ability of farmland to support extant species, you can still look at changes over time and see if the quality of that farmland based on this model is improving or degrading. And with our extents that we determined earlier, and with this condition data set, we can undertake a more detailed analysis. So for each global ecosystem typology functional group, and then we can drill down to each ecological vegetation class, we can calculate the area and generate statistics about the condition derived from the HCAS data set of each of these areas. And if we look at the mean column here, you can see that the forests are scoring 0.46, whereas the wetlands and grasslands are scoring, under 0.3. So that's as we expected from this data set. So the results, pass the pub test on first glance. We've also implemented within this project a crosswalk from EVCs up to IUCN GETS. So using the same analysis run, we can report against both the international standards in broader terms and also the really fine grain against the state-based EVCs. Now, this is still in the really early stages. It's really still at a tech demo, but our next steps are going to be to implement reporting across a reporting period. So taking the condition of the landscape as of a benchmark year and comparing that to condition at a reporting year. That's where the temporal data set becomes really useful. We also plan to enable calculation of extents from other data sets. So, for example, we're working at the moment on importing and utilising the catchment scale land use data set, the good old CLUM. And we're also looking at implementing condition reporting against a wide variety of data sets. HCAS gives you one facet, but there's lots of other metrics we can report against. And we'll be trolling through the NCMC again, looking for more condition metrics relating to each of the thematic areas that we wish to report on. Now, we found that the ability to visualize the geospatial data to be really useful as we're working on our project. And to this end, we're working with Climateworks to create a Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue, a demonstration public portal. And it'll be public. We're going to allow visualization of a selection of data sets from the NCMC, and the two you've seen today will be included, plus a dozen others. And we hope to also allow generation of those little reports, the tables and charts, probably at farm scale. We've got some challenges with this project due to the scale of the data sets and the computational resources that we require to run these analysis. Those tables and charts that you saw took around 20 minutes of compute to generate. And at farm scale, we want to ideally get that down to 5 seconds. So we've clearly got some optimization to do, but we're working through that process, and we hope to have that available early next year. Some links here for further information. We have the NCMC, the link's already in the chat for that. The Food Agility CRC page for this particular project, and a case study that we've written up for NCMC website about how we utilise the catalogue, and also a link there to CERTI's credentials in the natural environment space. I'll post these links in the chat shortly. Hope you found that interesting. So thank you very much. And I'll pass over to Chris to share his experiences in working in space.
Thanks, Richard. First of all, I acknowledge that I'm also a Wadawurrung country, and I pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. My job today is just to really give a bit of a snapshot of why, as a CMA, NRM region, we've been working with the catalogue, and hopefully to promote some questions and discussion after. So,
Chris, I'm just going to jump in. I don't think you're in presenter mode with your slides. I think
sorry, that's why. There we go. How's that?
Okay. Yeah, that's perfect. Great.
Sorry. So why are we as a CMA interested in natural capital? Well, it allows us as a CMA to understand the types, the extent and quality of natural assets within the region, the ecosystems that they provide, and then to try and monetize or understand what the benefits are to people to then make that investment connection. It also allows us to develop a regional and consistent approach to analysing and understanding the extent and quality of natural assets. And it also, as I mentioned before, allows us to articulate this to potential investors. So obviously there's carbon credits already, but there's also nature markets emerging, and in the future it could be other forms of credits and where we could connect data to those investment opportunities. One of the other things we're trying to do also is to use this data to better monitor trends in catchment conditions. So we want to capture this data once and use it many times. So that's the world, I suppose, that our CMA is trying to grapple with, is how do we get data and connect that investment natural capital story, but also monitoring as well. That then allows us to tap into non-traditional investment partners, but also to articulate to existing partners. So most of the NRMs will be getting money from federal government, and you'll notice that there is a natural capital lens in a lot of the grants that we're being asked to apply for. So that we're hoping that this work now will help us articulate those investment opportunities. To do a whole lot of this work, we've worked with a group called IDEA Group, who's worked with NRM regions before, and they've done a natural capital roadmap for our region. The roadmap identified 8 high-level actions. Two main ones were to complete a natural capital profile for the region, and then to integrate natural capital approach into existing information systems. And like most regions, we know we've got a lot of data. It's in various formats, different parts of the CMA, and it's been collected over 25 years. And a lot of the data that we have is what we've basically collected ourselves, that the state and federal government do not have. And so it was important for us to work out how do we catalogue this and how do we use this in the best way we can. So we needed a standardized format to structure the natural capital data, but also understand what the data gaps we have. We need to better articulate what our needs were and not to keep chasing new data. So one of the things we're finding as we're taking a step into natural capital world is that we're getting approached by a lot of smaller, some larger tech companies who say that we can do a whole lot of things for you if you adopt our data programs and data tools. And having a catalogue allows us to work out who we engage with instead of just going for the new shiny thing all the time. The other thing is we want to be able to get natural capital data at a paddock scale, but also to a catchment, and get that that story, if you like, to what we measure on the paddock, how that cascades up to a catchment scale, and vice versa. That for us is a holy grail that we're trying to grapple with and trying to get to. And so the work with the CERTI, so Richard and Francisco, the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue allows us to do this now. It's starting to work out what's available out there and what sort of regional and local information that we have that we can add to the catalogue. And I think for NRMs, it's going to be important with all these different acronyms that are coming our way. Accounting for nature, TFND, nature repair, ESG goals. It's important to have data in a way that you can then pivot that story to the investor or to the measurement that is required. We don't want to go, as NRMs, go down the one path and then restrict our opportunities for investment or for telling our story. We want data in a way that we can then tell that story to different investors under different metric requirements. Yeah, so to enable this, we need clear, consistent, and structured natural capital data to allow us to dictate our role and to articulate the best outcomes, just not only for your region, but also your farmers as well. I'll end it at that. Thanks, Rach.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. I mean, it was so encouraging to hear all the presentations, and it really sounds like it's an incredibly powerful resource and tool in addressing some of the gaps that we've, observed and that certainly the sector has highlighted over many years. I'm going to go to questions now, and I'll just remind everybody to keep putting their questions into the chat. So the first question we had from the floor, which I'm going to go to now, and I know that there was a partial answer that went into the chat, but I'm just going to ask, I think it was a question to Francisco. I'm going to ask him to expand on it. So the question was, are the tiers related to any accounting reporting framework requirements? So there was a bit of discussion around this, but I just wondered, Francisco, if you wanted to talk to that a bit more.
So the short answer is no, not directly. It wouldn't be possible because if you tried to map it directly to one framework, you'd find that it was inconsistent with another framework. So it's our own thing. There are many different dimensions by which you could rearrange and classify methods and data sources, such as cost, such as verifiability, accuracy, etc. So the three tiers are really a compromise, a kind of a mashup of those different things, and just recognizing that, in general, there are these extremes of kind of going out and measuring stuff in the field versus, a lot of really advanced methods, some of which might be field-based, others which are often remote sensing based in tier 3. And then there's a kind of middle road, which is where you make use of the most accessible data that's available to you from publicly available sources. So yeah, that's how we ended up with it. It was also inspired by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, uses a 3-tier approach, which is similar in classifying ways of doing natural greenhouse gas accounting at the national level.
Thank you. I'll ask whoever asked the question. Hopefully that's a comprehensive answer, but please feel free to add in any follow-ups if you'd like to. So one of the questions I've got here, so you've mentioned the SEA and also the TNFD frameworks. So they're the major sort of international standards. And so going to some of the domestic standards, what are the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Frameworks sort of standards? So can it pick up on industry specific or even ag standard frameworks? Is it, how compatible it is, I guess, with emerging frameworks and requirements?
I'm happy to take that. Yes, the catalogue is compatible with the Australian Agricultural Sustainability Framework. The team, we've worked closely with the indicators and data ecosystem projects working on the AASF to ensure that there's fairly good high-level agreement between the natural capital related criteria within the AASF framework and the NCMC. although the AASF is broader than just natural capital, covering both environmental and social capital as well. So we don't cover those related to those social and economic sustainability. But if the AASF does agree on specific metrics or indicators in the future, we'll certainly be able to cross-reference them. In terms of other domestic initiatives, there is good alignment between the catalogue and the Farming for the Future indicators. So our technical reference panel included Sue Ogilvie from the Farming for the Future initiative. And also, good alignment. Francisco mentioned the AFN methodology, so we point to publicly available AFN methods.
Great, thanks, Ethne. I've got a question that's, I think, for Chris Pitfield, really. So where people are doing TNFD reporting, and I think Corangamite are, and I think others as well, will the catalogue be, support that kind of reporting? Do you think that is it fit for purpose for those sorts of, for that?
Yeah, we're not doing TFD reporting as of yet, but we are exploring how our CMA works with partners who have to. That's kind of our focus for that. But yeah, going back to what I said, Rach, we're also working with TRUI, with their platforms with ESG goals, for example. Like, we need data to inform those targets, those goals. The nature repair, it's going to need data, and we want to have it in one. We want our data in one spot that we can just pivot to anything that's available, instead of trying to set up frameworks and structures for every different opportunity. We want the one consistent structure to work off. So, yeah.
Yeah. I suppose I'm wondering around the flexibility through, from start to end, in terms of, having, data in one place for project planning through to, utilising the methods and metrics for reporting and so on. And do you think it'll sort of streamline those processes the way through? Like, do you see it as an sort of supporting end-to-end planning to reporting, Chris?
Yeah, well, that's the work that we're trying to do with the CERTI teams, trying to understand how it does work in real practice. And it's been good so far. It's really testing us. But yeah, that's the end game where we're trying to get to. Yep.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Claire Parks has raised her hand. Claire, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, hello. I'm from Local Land Services in New South Wales. Thanks for all of this, really topical for us. In New South Wales, the government has committed to local land services leading property scale and regional scale natural capital accounting. And we're trying to work out what that might look like and how we're going to do this into the future. However, it really rests on what our state environment department develops in terms of state scale natural capital accounting. So we're trying to make sure that anything that we do in the future will align with what they do at the state scale. Have you got you guys from Climateworks, or even Chris and Richard, have you got any suggestions on what we might need to look out for in that kind of trying to align things across scales, if that makes sense? Or in our work with our state government friends, our environment department friends, any advice for us on how we can advocate for what is easy for us to do at the regional and local scale or property scale? Does that make any sense? How can we use the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue in this kind of trying to align across scales?
I'll offer some advice or some insights from our experience so far in our project. So the data set I brought up for the condition metrics was 90 metre scale, 90 metre pixels. And by using a fairly fine scaled data set for the condition metrics and a good quality extent data set, so that you can separate out areas that are supposed to be remnant bushland or supposed to be wetlands or supposed to be croplands. You can report at any scale you like. You can draw a polygon around your reporting area and aggregate all the data within that polygon. So the tables I displayed earlier, they were calculated over that entire region that we're working in for this project, which is 253,000 hectares. But when we're interacting with those data sets, we draw a polygon of 30 or 40 hectares just to make the processing faster. And because we're working with fine scale data sets, that we're getting meaningful results at both scales. What we hope to be able to do in the long run is to allow land managers to upload their own data sets, so that, like, we've got the IUCN GET and the EVC data sets to calculate extents, but a property owner can upload shape files that categorise areas that they've actually fenced off for regeneration or for windbreaks, and areas that like farm dams or wetlands that they don't ever cultivate. So they can provide, super high quality, high resolution, down to metre accuracy. And we'd like to get to the point where we can cascade these data sets together and generate extents from both the national scale, state scale, catchment scale, and farm scale, taking the best quality of each of those data sets. And the data that the landowners upload would only be visible in their reports. We won't be making that publicly available, but we'll, over that same area, anyone could draw a polygon and generate a report from public data. That's the approach we're taking. It only works when you can choose the data sets. If the state government dictate which data sets that you need to use and they're not available at the correct scale to do that, then you're going to have a problem. So in terms of advocating and advocacy, I'd be on the front foot making sure that they ask for metrics that you can generate from public data sets, make sure the data is available, and craft the reporting framework around what can actually be done.
I just saw Chris Pitfield's unmuted, so I'm assuming he wants to make a contribution to this discussion, which I'll let him do, and then Claire, if you still had a follow up to that, I'll take that.
Yep. So in Victoria, we have a state of environment reporting, and a lot of it is related to EVCs, ecological vegetation classes. Our region, we've also developed a native vegetation data set called the Floristic Management Unit. It's a lot more accurate. It's paddock scale. We've tested it's 96% accurate with what that landscape should be. I think what this allows us to do eventually is we can report to EVC scale, but then we can also report to FMU, so a more refined scale. That allows us to say, yep, to the minister, we're achieving so many goals based on your state of environment reporting, but also allows us to then attract investment for an investor who wants that particular paddock scale outcome, a more accurate number or accurate result, or better refined data. So the key for us is getting everything to talk to each other at different scales and identifying what the gaps are, then for us to then find out how to fill those gaps.
And the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue is kind of a enabling reference point for that. Is that what?
Yeah, it's starting to look at, we can test the national state level data. Yep, that ticks a box. That's what we need. Oh, we need to find better data. So that's the questions to us as a CMA from the guys at CERDI is saying, this is what this data says. We say, oh, actually, we know we've got better data. So we bring that into that decision structure as well.
And into the catalogue? So does the FMU data go into the catalogue as a resource, or?
I'll throw to Francisco. We're trying to work out how to get, the key for us is how to get that local regional data that we have but you don't want to show publicly because a lot of that is come from trust from landholders as well. So how do you wrangle that opportunity as well? So, but Francisco, we've tried to work out the FMUs and the EVCs.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can just add, it is getting a bit beyond the scope of the catalogue currently. So when we did add, when we did sort of a review to add public data sources, we prioritised anything that was national. We did add in a few subnational resources, but only if we couldn't find anything that was national. So, for example, we've got the national map, which is based on the National Vegetation Information System, and which is also, as Richard mentioned, mapped to the IUCN Global Ecosystem Topology. So we've got that available for mapping extent of ecosystem assets. But as both Richard and Chris have mentioned, there's potentially much more granular data available at state level. So really what you start to need there is what we call crosswalks. So a crosswalk is a schema, a classification sort of mechanism that maps, every component of one classification system onto one or more components of another classification system. And we've had to do a lot of digging to come up with a crosswalk in Victoria from the national NVIS IUCN GEP system down to the EVCs that Chris mentioned. And what we would like to do, having done the work to dig that up, we'd like to publish it. We'd like to publish it in a machine readable format so that you can actually just point towards a location and get that crosswalk and basically do the translation with the minimum manual effort required. But those crosswalks, the crosswalk that we've discovered for Victoria isn't going to be any use to you in New South Wales. So, those crosswalks have to be discovered and then made publicly available for each state. And then we'll get to a situation where it's much easier to use different sets of data interchangeably.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I suppose while we were talking, Francisco, I was sort of reflecting on what you'd been saying about, I guess, landholders being able to upload data and shape files and so on. And I suppose I was wondering then, how does it work in with, I guess, more general users uploading data that's, I suppose, available for their uses through the same platform, I guess, just for ease of reporting. And is that sort of how it works with the crosswalks? Like, so is there sort of, state level data in there now that's only sort of accessible by limited people, or is it just sort of not?
Well, we should clarify that there's no data in the NCMC at the moment. We're working on this demonstration portal. So the idea is that we will add it as a kind of test portal once the project is finished early next year. And that will enable you to access a subset of the data sources that the catalogue currently points to.
Okay.
But if we have a lot of feedback, that is a really useful direction to go in, then we'll be, looking for ways of supporting further work to further develop that. And ultimately, then it might evolve into something where you could upload your own data and combine it with public data and then get back a combined result that's only available to you, or that you can maybe permission to pass on to someone else. But that's a kind of holy grail that's a little way in the future.
Okay. But I suppose while we're on data sources, so if a private company was to approach the team and say, well, we've got this great data set and we think that should be included in the catalogue, but, we'd want people to pay for it, I guess, how are you approaching, potential access?
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, for now, really, we're just focusing on freely available public data sets. We do recognise that there's a lot of very useful private data out there, but currently that's not within the scope.
Yeah. Thanks, Ethne. I'll take one more question from the floor if there is one. Otherwise, I've got a final question that I'd ask each of the panelists. So if anyone wants to put up their yellow hand to ask a final burning question while they have the chance, then I'll take it. Okay. I'm going to go to my final question then. So I'm going to ask each of you. So I just would like to know what, for each individual, what really excites you about the Natural Capital Measurement Catalogue, and what is its superpower as far as you can see it? Now or in the future?
I'll jump in first.
You can go in the order that you spoke. So Chris, you're at the end. So we'll go Ethne, Francisco, Richard, Chris.
Yeah. I think I was really reiterating what I shared earlier. It is this common language, really making sure that we're all talking the same language, that there is this comparability. I think what is exciting is the initiative, the demonstration portal that we're working on with the CERTI team, really testing out where we may take the catalogue into the future to be more an interactive portal, a platform. So yeah, exciting times ahead.
Thanks, Ethne. Francisco?
I think I'd echo that to some extent. I think its superpower is being a kind of universal translator. I think it was one of the first places that actually brought natural capital accounting perspective associated with SEA together in one, under one roof, with the natural capital assessment perspective that was being pursued by the TNFD and Natural Capital Protocol and sustainability reporting frameworks. And previously they were very, very different and couldn't really talk to each other. I'm not saying that it's the catalogue that solved that, but
now they're best friends.
We've helped to kind of show that they are just different perspectives on nature. And yeah, I think that it's something which is kind of greater than the sum of its parts, so it's the linkages both within the catalogue and externally from the catalogue to other things that add up to its overall benefit.
Great. Thanks, Francisco. And Richard, did you have something to add?
I'm going to take a much more practical approach. For me, the catalogue superpower is placing some guardrails around projects that are working in this space. I work with a team of 12 developers and GIS analysts, and if I say to them, go and find me some data about the environment, they'll just get lost in the weeds. They'll have a fantastic time exploring maps and data sets and data and doing analysis. But at the end of the day, the NCMC, if I say go and choose 4 data sets from this catalogue, then they'll go and do that and get back to work and start producing valuable outputs straight away. So for me, it just increases productivity when working in this space.
Oh, fantastic, Richard. And Chris Pitfield with the last word.
I think the thing excites me is getting that paddock to catchment scale data consistency. So if someone fences off 100 hectares of bush, it's going to contribute to a catchment scale story, and vice versa. I think that's the area that we need to get to is that paddock to catchment and catchment to paddock scale data sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. And something obviously that everybody that's in the room is deeply passionate about is telling the story of the power of regional NRM to go from that paddock to that landscape scale outcomes. So I'd like to thank all of our presenters today for joining us in the tent. It's been a really incredibly valuable discussion. You can see that Trish has just put up the Menti, which will just let us know the usefulness really and of the webinar to everyone, and also the next steps that you'd like to see with the catalogue. So if you could just take the time to do that before you go to have some well-earned lunch, then that will be wonderful. We will put the webinar onto our YouTube channel once we've had it edited, so look out for it in the next few weeks. Thanks again, everyone.